What if the land of the free built its legacy on the subjugation of others? The story of U.S. imperialism in Puerto Rico, Guam, and Samoa reveals a complex tapestry of conquest, control, and resilience that challenges the narrative of American exceptionalism. Welcome to the sands of history, where we unearth the untold stories of these islands, caught in the tides of U.S. expansion at the turn of the 20th century. Join us as we explore how these territories became pawns in a global power game, and how their people have navigated the consequences ever since. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support our journey into history's depths, and check the description for links to help us financially continue this work. The dawn of U.S. imperialism, context and ambition. The late 19th century marked a turning point for the United States as it transitioned from a nation focused on continental expansion to one with global imperial ambitions. The Spanish-American War of 1898 was the catalyst, a brief but pivotal conflict that saw the U.S. emerge as a colonial power. Driven by a mix of economic interests, strategic military goals, and a belief in manifest destiny, the U.S. seized Puerto Rico, Guam, and parts of Samoa, reshaping their destinies. These islands, far from the American mainland, became testing grounds for a new kind of empire, one cloaked in the rhetoric of democracy, but rooted in control. Puerto Rico. From Spanish colony to U.S. territory, Puerto Rico, a lush Caribbean island, was ceded to the U.S. under the Treaty of Paris in 1898, ending Spain's 400-year rule. The U.S. saw Puerto Rico as a strategic foothold in the Caribbean, ideal for naval bases and trade routes. But for Puerto Ricans, the transition was jarring. The Foraker Act of 1900 established a civilian government, but it was far from democratic. S-appointed governors held significant power, and Puerto Ricans were denied full citizenship until 1917 under the Jones-Shafroth Act. Economically, U.S. policies transformed Puerto Rico into a sugar monoculture, benefiting American corporations while marginalizing local farmers. The imposition of English in schools and the suppression of Spanish sparked cultural resistance, as Puerto Ricans clung to their identity. Politically, the island's status remains contentious, neither a state nor fully independent. Puerto Rico exists in a liminal space, with debates over statehood, independence, or Commonwealth status persisting to this day. The human cost was profound. Poverty rates soared under U.S. policies, and migration to the mainland became a lifeline for many. By 2025, Puerto Rico's economy still grapples with debt crises, exacerbated by natural disasters like Hurricane Maria in 2017, which exposed the vulnerabilities of its colonial status. The island's story is one of resilience, with movements for self-determination gaining traction, yet the shadow of U.S. imperialism looms large. Guam, the Pacific outpost. Half a world away, Guam, a small island in the western Pacific, faced a similar fate. Ceded to the U.S. in 1898, Guam became a key naval and air base, its strategic location making it a linchpin in America's Pacific ambitions. The indigenous Chamorro people, who had endured Spanish rule, now faced a new colonial master. Unlike Puerto Rico, Guam's residents were not granted U.S. citizenship until 1950 under the Organic Act, and even then, their rights were limited. U.S. military presence defined Guam's modern history. The island was occupied by Japan during World War II, a brutal period that strengthened Chamorro loyalty to the U.S. upon liberation in 1944. Yet this loyalty came at a cost. Vast tracts of land were seized for military bases, displacing Chamorro families and disrupting traditional ways of life. By 2025, nearly a third of Guam's land remains under U.S. military control, a constant reminder of its strategic importance. Culturally, the Chamorro people have fought to preserve their language and traditions against Americanization. Political movements for greater autonomy or decolonization have grown, though Guam's small population and economic dependence on the U.S. complicate these efforts. The island's story reflects a delicate balance between military utility and cultural survival, with the Chamorro people carving out their identity amidst imperial pressures. Samoa, a divided paradise, the Samoan archipelago, split between US and German, later New Zealand, control in 1899, tells a unique story of imperialism. The US acquired what is now American Samoa through the Tripartite Convention, driven by the need for a coaling station at Pago Pago Harbor. Unlike Puerto Rico and Guam, American Samoa was not granted citizenship. Its residents remain US nationals, a status that limits their rights, including the ability to vote in US elections. US administration in American Samoa was initially hands-off, with naval governors allowing traditional Samoan governance structures, or FAA Samoa, to persist. However, economic dependency grew, as American Samoa became a hub for tuna canning, dominated by US corporations. This industry brought jobs, but also environmental degradation and cultural shifts, as Western influences seeped into Samoan life. The Mau movement in the 1920s, though stronger in Western Samoa, echoed in American Samoa as a call for self-governance. By 2025, American Samoa's political status remains unresolved, with debates over citizenship and self-determination ongoing. The island's isolation and small population, around 50,000, limit their leverage, yet Samoans have maintained a strong cultural identity, blending tradition with modernity. Common threads: economic exploitation and cultural resistance. Across Puerto Rico, Guam, and American Samoa, US imperialism followed a pattern: strategic acquisition, economic restructuring, and cultural imposition. Each territory was reshaped to serve US interests, whether as a Caribbean stronghold, a Pacific military hub, or a trade outpost. Local economies were tied to American markets, often at the expense of self-sufficiency. Sugar in Puerto Rico, military bases in Guam, and tuna in American Samoa became economic linchpins, benefiting US corporations and the military-industrial complex. Culturally, each territory faced Americanization efforts, from English-language education to legal systems that marginalized indigenous practices. Yet resistance was universal. Puerto Ricans preserved Spanish and their cultural heritage, Chamorros revitalized their language, and Samoans upheld Fea Samoa. These acts of defiance highlight the resilience of colonized peoples, even as they navigate the constraints of US rule. The legacy of imperialism, 2025 and beyond. By 2025, the legacies of US imperialism in these territories are starkly visible. Puerto Rico's debt crisis, with over $70 billion in obligations as of recent reports, underscores its economic dependency. Guam's military buildup, part of US-China geopolitical tensions, raises questions about sovereignty and environmental impacts. American Samoa's limited political rights fuel calls for change, though its small size limits global attention. Decolonization movements face obstacle, economic reliance, political fragmentation, and historical inertia, but grassroots activism, from Puerto Rico's independence advocates to Chamorro cultural revivalists, signals ongoing resistance. The human story, voices from the margins. Beyond geopolitics, the story of US imperialism is deeply human. In Puerto Rico, families displaced by economic policies or hurricanes carry the weight of uncertainty. In Guam, Chamorro elders share stories of loss, while younger generations advocate for land rights. In American Samoa, communities balance tradition with global pressures. These voices, often overlooked, remind us that imperialism's impact is personal, shaping lives across generations. Conclusion. A call to reflect and act. The history of US imperialism in Puerto Rico, Guam, and American Samoa challenges us to confront the complexities of power and resilience. As Lefebvre noted, the US's imperial ambitions were both economic and ideological, leaving a legacy that continues to shape these territories. Let's amplify the voices seeking justice and self-determination. Like, share, and subscribe to join us in exploring more untold histories and check the description for links to help us financially sustain this work. Welcome to the sands of history, where the past speaks and the future listens.